welcome to Are You Sure You Want to Do This? I'm really excited to have my longtime friend, Lezlie Harrison, on with us today. She is going to talk to us about life as a jazz singer and what it took for her to go from playing in a sports bar to three people, of which I was one of, to touring Europe, the Middle East, and having her own shows on WBGO Jazz Station in New York. So it's with a great honor and pleasure that I welcome Lezlie Harrison to our conversation.
The three people in the room gig. I'm
Which
glad you reminded me of that.
I will never forget. I even remember what you wore. You had on black leggings, your red boots, your oversized white button-up shirt,
Oh
and your
wow.
guitarist, Will.
And oh wow, that was the early days.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. And I had a friend of mine visiting. Scott was visiting from, I don't know if he was in Germany then or back in Atlanta, but I had taken him down there. And I remember you went to take a break and you were like, okay, don't anyone leave. And I've counted all of y'all, so I'll know if you've left or not. Sports bar at Cody's.
Cody's, yeah, that was our little neighborhood hang when from the Jazz Gallery, which was right down the street. Now it is called Hudson Square or something like that. But
Oh, it's
wow,
been a
well,
long time.
it's been a long time. Wow, yeah, those were the early days, and well, here we are, right?
And here we are.
Good to be
What
with you.
good to be with you. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to talk to you about your journey. I mean, you started out as a model and you have done 1,000 other jobs just like the rest of us in order to pay the bills while we chase our passion.
Right.
So I would love for the listeners to sort of hear a little bit, sort of brief, I guess, overview bio of what it was like getting started back in those early days. And has this journey in general been kind of what you thought it would be?
Thank you for asking that question, Brooks. You know, I often ask myself, or I will tell younger people, like, I don't know, like, I was just brave, I think. I wouldn't tell anybody else to do it how I did it because I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, yes, I knew I wanted to go to Paris mostly to learn the language and immerse myself in the culture. Oh yeah, then I'll model while I'm there because I had met a photographer in New York. That's how I got to New York, to Paris. She said, she come and she got me my very first modeling gig, which paid me a lot of money in New York. I said, oh, I'll go to Paris. But then that morphed into, going to parties and hanging out with her. I wasn't always on the runway. I was, carrying around camera equipment and doing all kinds of things to be a model and to live in Paris. And then one day someone heard me singing at a party. And he said, oh, he poked his head around. He said, oh, we started chatting. He's from South Africa. He lives in Paris. He's doing a record. Would you be on the record? Oh, okay, sure. Then, okay, so someone paying me to sing. It was something I wanted to do, but it wasn't really like, I didn't know what I wanted to do at that. I was 28. I was trying to find myself. But here I end up modeling and singing in Paris and making a little bit of money doing all the other odd jobs. Okay, now we come to New York. I'm coming back to New York. I met Dale. And he said, well, we can keep this transatlantic relationship going up, or you can move back to New York. I'm like, okay, well, and he lives in the village. Okay, I'll go back to New York and live in the village. And thinking I didn't know what I was going to do. I had already had a career in radio in my early days, in my early 20s. I started at WBGO, but that was no longer on the table. And I worked at the Film Forum. I did things that were in the arts at that time. The Film Forum was it had just moved to a new location in the village. Great movies. I started to meet. That's where I met RuPaul. RuPaul was just hanging out at the Film Forum, and hanging out, rolling around on his roller skates, and coming and having popcorns on days. Sometimes he didn't have enough money to eat, so I was in that world. I was in the jazz world. I was around lots of musicians and singers and instrumentalists and artists and actors. And I was also acting. That was my main source of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an actress. So, hey, I've got some singing under my belt. And, oh, well, I sang in a couple of shows, not musicals, but I sang in a couple of theater pieces, never on Broadway, always off Broadway, but working with great actors, Negro Ensemble Company I work with down at Henry Street Settlement in New York. So once again, meeting people along the way. And I love the people in this on the scene. I love hanging out with the musicians and the writers and the authors, and just it was just a wonderful world to be in, and jazz brought those people in. So okay, I'm in it as an actress. Some people knew me as a model. Once again, I didn't know what I was doing, Brooksy. I was just, like sometimes the universe moves you in a direction. I had faith. I was really into my Buddhist practice. So I just was like, okay, well, as long as I had a job and I could eat and I had a roof over my head. Of course, my mother was breathing down my back because, what are you doing when you get a job? I didn't even learn how to type until like in my early 30s because I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to do something other than scoop popcorn into a bag, you know, usher people to their seats. And I lived in the village and I worked in the village. So I was like, okay, wait a minute, I forgot where I was. I'm so excited I'm taking myself back to that time and it's almost messing me up. Oh, so I needed a job. I needed to work like a 9 to 5. And I hadn't done that in a while because I used to temp. So I knew about working in an office. So I went to the film forum. And then from the film forum, I met someone and I think I might have gone to a temp agency, but I went to Country Road Clothing, which was in fashion. And I worked as a receptionist. I always had a great speaking voice. So I was the receptionist. And then working at Country Road, I met someone who was, I think maybe she was from Australia. And she said, oh, I have a great job for you. Being an assistant for this event planner. Turned out to be Karen Bacon Events. Dale said, oh, she's great. She's got great books. So I get into this business as an assistant to Karen Bacon, but entering a world of theater, of events, of, all the glitter and the glamour and the work that goes behind it. So I was like, okay, so now I can act and work. The unfortunate thing was a lot of the rehearsals took place during the day, and I had to either you eat or you go and rehearse. And it wasn't always a lot of money in the theater. So I decided, well, then maybe I'll use this time to polish up my singing and try that out. Not that I was just pulling at straws or anything. It was something that I felt I could do, but I was intimidated by all the people that I knew who are now friends or acquaintances on the music scene that I was hanging out on. Cassandra Wilson, Betty Carter, all the big names that I'd listened to, but now they're in my world. I hang out with them in the nightlife and jazz clubs and jazz festivals. So I kept my singing to myself. Didn't tell a soul. I just would, we had the jazz gallery and we had a piano there, the piano that once belonged to Paul Desmond. And I knew all the great piano players. And there was one gentleman, Harry Whitaker. He was the music director for Roy Ayers and also for Roberta Flack. And he hosted, I don't know if you ever went with me to Arturo's on Houston Street.
Oh, yes.
We went, he would say, you should come to Arturo's, and on Mondays and Thursdays they had they had jazz music and they had people sit in. And I said, okay, well, I never would sit in, but I would invite Harry to the jazz gallery to work with me, just work with me. And we work on songs. He said, is this what you want to do? Okay, let's do it. We work on songs. And by the time we finished, after a few months, he said, okay, now you've got a little bit of a repertoire. Now come to Arturo's and sit in. I was like, ooh, sit in. Like really do it. And I got my legs there. And then I said, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Now, once again, I did not go to school for singing. I did not go to school. I went to school I went to university, but theater was my major. Singing was nowhere on the map. And but it was in my heart because I did know a little bit about carrying a note as I sang in my grandfather's church in the choir when I would go to North Carolina. So I knew a little bit about a note or two. But once again, did I know what I was doing? No, I just trusted it. And now I have a job working 9 to 5 as an executive assistant with insurance Karen had all kinds of great events. That's where you and I met. It was like a really fun gig. And so it kind of fueled like my also like, okay, I want to be around these people. I want to be around this environment. I want to be around this energy. And Lord knows, because I had a salary, I could afford to go out at night and drink, not anymore, but so I could go and sit in, and then I could start doing gigs and having that job in that, though I know my boss at the time, what Karen was like, my timing coming in the morning, I could be 10 minutes late or half an hour late or 1 minute late. It was always hard, but I will always to this day thank her for never firing me because, I was out at night trying to do this music thing. I didn't know where it was going to take me, but I know I liked it. And, when you're out late at night singing, that leads into going to another jam session. But I don't know how I got up some mornings, Brooksy Hughes.
Well, couple of things here real quick. It's funny. I didn't know about you meeting RuPaul. I met RuPaul as well
Mm-hmm.
when he lived in Atlanta. And that was in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be late 80s? No, like 84, 85, 86. Because I was sneaking into clubs to go hear music underage. That's what you did. And
Mm-hmm.
RuPaul was the bartender at a place called the Celebrity Club on Ponce de Leon.
Wow.
So he was like my first real bartender when I was like 17. And we were going in there. Really, my motivation was to hear live music.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like really cool. And he had a band back then called Now Explosion, if I remember correctly. Quite the character. And it was
Oh,
before he
yeah.
went like full drag from what I can
Right.
remember. And then he went to Backstreet. So I got my RuPaul days too, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, to see him, his advance and what he's done for the genre, but just to know like, boy, RuPaul used to come around and we just just kicking. It was a group of ushers and managers who worked at the Film Forum, and he'd come in. He was always hilarious, skinny legs and all on some roller skates and t-shirt, and he was just. And now to see, he's this mogul now, so those kinds of people in our lives, I think also, encouraged me, especially to just, I knew that I wanted to be in that world with creative people.
That's interesting. You ended up there because you sort of knew what you wanted your day to be like and the
Yeah.
world and the people you wanted to be around. That's kind of how I ended up in events because I didn't know what the job was that I
Mm-hmm.
wanted, but I knew the environment that I liked and thrived in. And when I got dropped in the deep end on some stuff kind of early on in my career, I knew like, I'm not looking back. I
Right.
did not know what to expect. There was no training for it. I had no expectations. And I think today, the event industry is so visible in a way
Mm.
that it wasn't 30 years ago, that people enter into it with a certain expectation. And oftentimes it doesn't meet those expectations, not
Right.
necessarily in a bad way. It's
Right.
just different. So
Well,
it's
no, it was.
interesting.
Yeah, well, I have worked temp jobs in banks and in law firms. There was just nothing there for me. I mean, I had a great voice. I could do the job. But I think is when I went to Country Road Clothing, because I liked fashion. It was close to where I lived in the village, so I could walk to work. That was like number one. And I was close to in the village where the music was happening. So my world was right there. But then when I went to work for Karen Bacon, because actually that was the last office job that I ever had. I never have. Well, no, I did once because eating is essential when you're in this business. And sometimes
Paying rent.
you're paying rent, like I was just refused. And I think at some point I was trying to grow up and move out on my own because in all this traveling that I'd done, I'd never had my own apartment. I had always had a roommate or roommate situations. And then I moved in, with my guy, and I never lived alone. So at some point I wanted to have that experience, but you got to pay rent. And that job, that 9 to 5 that I had working, which was not a 9 to 5, mind you, that was, and it was exciting. It was Karen's, the events that we did and that I participated in, and from the auditions to the actual production, just to be in that world, it was exciting. And to hear what happens in these meetings behind the scenes, it was exciting. I mean, some mornings I'd get in there like, I just gotten home at like 5 o'clock in the morning, but I knew I had to get to work. Because if you don't work, as James Brown says, you don't work, you don't eat.
Yes. That's so true. Well, I think this is interesting. For as long as I've known you, I have never known the story about when and how you started transitioning into wanting to sing jazz. And I know we were there, we both started at Karen's
Hmm.
in 98, within about a month of each other. And we were
Sure.
there for about a decade, off and on,
Yeah.
various ways. I'd leave, you'd bring me back. You'd leave, I'd bring you back.
Right.
Um, and Karen just being, I think, for both of us, such a significant influence
Yeah.
in what shaped our professional
Right.
futures. Not to
Absolutely.
mention the close friendship and family relations that we still hold to this day.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that will always be one of the most special times being a KBE girl, right?
KB, yeah, absolutely. And I had a chance to thank Karen recently. I said, like, because working in an environment like that really, it made me know for sure. I'm getting all teary eyed to know for sure that's what I wanted to do, because it was exciting, it was fun, it was free from, like I couldn't imagine working in an office. No shame to anybody who works in an office, but like that, not, because we did it, but just doing the same thing every day, I knew I would probably be fired, because I think I was, from many temp jobs. But just put a phone in my hand, I'm cool with that. But pushing papers and things like that, well, that's not going to work for me. So yeah, I did that. And I do encourage people, especially younger people, to do, like, find jobs that will help fuel your, even if you don't know, I didn't know what my goal was, but I knew I wanted to be in the public eye, like, on stage, and not in any, I don't take that, in a conceited way, but I knew that I liked being in front of people and entertaining and giving and getting. But I also know having jobs that fuel that, especially at a younger age, that is very beneficial, because you might get in a place and decide, oh, hey, I can't imagine myself, maybe I should be selling insurance. That might be my thing.
I don't think either one of us would have
No.
fallen into that trap. I did cold calling life insurance in my mid to late 20s while I was trying to get going for events. And again, I did not know which position, I did not know anything. I was just gigging because I knew I did not want to be selling life insurance on the
Right.
phone. So you do what you have to
You
get through. But
Well, that's it, yeah.
here's let me ask you this though. All those jobs, and so we talk about the jobs we don't want to do, the office
Mhm.
temping, the receptionist, I also temped once. I don't even think I picked up my paycheck. I got fired after the third day because I had no idea how to use a computer. There was like 17 line phone system, and we just all agreed like this didn't happen. I was like,
Yeah.
you keep the money, I'm going to go. We're erasing this
Just
from my like this is not part of my story.
yeah,
But it was a huge part of my story, and me learning, like you said, there's certain skills you're going to need to know along the way that are going to benefit you when you get into the business of what it is you're doing.
right.
Because being a jazz singer, being a performer, isn't just about getting on stage and performing.
No,
You
no.
have to operate a business. So, what are some of the maybe unexpected tasks, day to day ins and outs of the business part of managing yourself or working with the manager that you found surprising, or both a good way or bad way?
Well, working in an office and learning, one, I had to I spent the summer at Hunter College learning how to do word processing, learning how to type, and Excel and all those programs that you had to know to work in an office, so I could be able to make a little bit more money. I had to type a little faster than this. But um but what I learned, and I can organize for other people, but I need someone to organize for me, but I don't have the money oftentimes to hire somebody. And that's probably the lesson that I didn't learn until just a little while ago, because I am my own business. I don't check in with anyone. I mean, I have to be on the air when I'm supposed to be, and that is my job. But I like, oh yeah, I'm an independent. It's me. It's just me. And most times it's really hard, especially when you don't have a manager. And sometimes I have a manager and sometimes I don't, because work sometimes is easy. It comes to me, people call me and say, hey, but now I'm like, you need to be out there on the phone hustling. And that's the part, like I've got like a million things to do. Like I need someone else to do that, but I can't pay someone to do that, you know? And so I think I probably should have taken a business course along the way. I mean, I know all these applications. I did stuff for someone. I kept books, but there was somebody checking behind me and I had to keep things in order for someone else. That skill I wish I had learned more, because I'm just learning it now, like in the last couple of years. And it's like, oh yeah, taxes. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, 1099s. Yeah, that I wish I had spent more time learning, and I'm learning it now, and it's never too late. But I think if you want to be in this business, you have to know how to take care of yourself on all aspects, how to keep a roof over your head, how to, to be a boss or to be an employer, and also, I'm still learning this, to ask for what you deserve or what you think you should, what you think you're worth. And that is a struggle for me, but I do it, and I'm always like, can somebody else do this for me? But I actually enjoy doing it myself now, because each time I do it, it makes it a little better.
I have that same struggle.
Hmm.
I was able to do it for Karen very well. The number of
Me too. Right.
times that she was willing to give away the farm to do something because she really wanted to, and I would encourage her, you need to stick to your guns at what this project and body of work is worth, because it was never out of line.
Right.
She was always far more than reasonable, but she would just want to do it. And so for me to step in and be that person for her, it was easy. Very, very hard for me to do it for myself. And I don't know if this is something, I've talked to other women about this. It tends to be something that falls more within women in
Mm,
business than with men. So I don't know if it's just something that we have in our hormonal system that makes it a little
I
hard to
hate it.
do, but
I hate it.
I hate it. But we have to do it,
But
right?
and we have to, and it's like, if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. So you do it, but and if you keep saying you want it and never ask for it, then you haven't learned anything. So,
Right.
but I find, and I'm sure you do as well, when you say it and put it in motion, and it happens, it's like, oh, each time it gets a little easier, and you say,
It
well,
does. And
can I ask for a little
sometimes,
bit more?
well, and sometimes though, there are times when you're going to do something for less. There are
Yeah.
times when the economy shifts,
Hmm.
or the whole
Yeah.
the project that you're on, there's a good cause. I mean, there's a lot of
Absolutely.
times to do that. And I think when you can balance that, then
Hmm.
you really sort of reach that level of success. The skills you're talking about, organizing myself as a producer, a lot of people think can be a very creative job. And I tell everybody it's 80/20, and 80% of it is logistics, and it's the Excel spreadsheets and computers and
Hmm.
figuring
Yeah.
things out, negotiations and contracts and blah, blah, blah. The part that I never learned that I'm now learning now for myself is the marketing. The phone would ring, I had a gig, just like what you were saying. I
Hmm.
have been blessed for almost 30 years. And a big part of that is in great thanks to Karen, sort of being anchored there for about a decade. And then and also running Bob Productions aside from the things that's doing for her. But I found after COVID, the industry changed with everything being shut down for a while, that I am relearning business in a way that I wish I had put more time and energy into
Right.
15 years ago. And when
Hmm.
I say put more time and energy into it, it isn't that I chose not to do it. I was naive about that I needed to do it,
Right.
and liked the idea that I was a small boutique
Hmm.
operation, very successful at that. But when you're starting over in a new market, all of those skills that you would have gained along the way would have been very helpful now. So I'm pivoting
Right.
to look at how I build business very differently. And I'm thinking about building a business now,
Mm.
not just getting a gig. So is that something as a performer, is there a point where it shifts from gigging to a business?
Well, that's a great question. I think now I'm seeing myself, and that's, with the help of, just looking at other artists that I admire, talking to people. I am my business. I am my brand. People talk about branding, so I have to, like how I present myself, what I do, it's how do I make, how is that a business, and how do I organize it as a business? If you ask me to do hosting, that's another level of my business. If you ask me to sing, that's another level of my business. To do, there's different tiers, and it's different. I think there should be different prices, but I'm still learning how to do that. And you take all those things into account: who's calling you, what the event is, what the cause is for, what else, everything. There's always something good that comes out of these kind of situations, but do I have the time? um, so just marketing myself, because I do my I do my own, a lot of my own social media. I have to do that. I have to do that. Most gigs you get now, they want to know how many people follow you, so that you want to be tagged. It's like, oh, I got only 5,000 on Instagram or whatever.
I do my own too. That's why there's nothing but dogs and seagulls on it.
Well, you have to learn. It's like, okay, creating content. And at one point, I did have someone working on my social media, but I learned a lot from her. So creating content. So I have all these photographs, and but then you just have to. Sometimes you have to shut it down, because sometimes you have to take care of yourself, and when you're your own business. Like right now, I can't afford to get my hair done, my nails done. Like I have to shift a little bit, because, if you're not working as much, and then it's like, okay, I'm out in the public. Well, the public's going to have to see me with this clear nail polish on, and, and the public's
Well,
going to
and
have to,
that's
yeah,
yeah, and that's part of it. When you are your brand and you run your own business, then you're going to have ups and downs and ebbs and flows, and that's just the
hmm,
nature of it, until you really move into something where it becomes a company,
right.
more people. But that that is a whole nother level of thinking and stress and management that sometimes can interfere with, from at least from what I've seen in my standpoint, can interfere with the art, because now you're doing that.
That is the problem. I mean, I'm
Mm.
having that right now, because I need to work on another record, and an opportunity came up just yesterday to record. And I'm like, okay, now I need the time just to focus on the music I want to do, because it's like I don't want to miss this opportunity. But it's like I'm doing all these other things, but am I doing as much singing? Singing is what really, being on stage and performing and singing and is what I really love to do. But in order to do that and to afford that, I have to do these other things that, though they're in the business that I love. I love music. It's like, am I honing my craft to get the best out of me for this project? I have two projects that I have on the burner, and they require my vocal cords and my vocal spirit to be healthy. And it's like, okay, I've got a million things to do in the next 2 weeks that have nothing to do with my singing, other than, I have a gig, but I need to organize these other things. And it's like, do I get up earlier? I get up early, but from the moment I wake up, I start working. And then at some point I shut down, because I would like to eat and have dinner, and I burn out.
What about, okay, so you've recorded an album.
Two.
Two. I only have one.
Well, we'll have to get you the other
I need
one. Which one don't
to
you
know.
have? You have Let Them Talk.
Yes.
Okay, I have to get you Soul Book #1, and by the time the year ends, hopefully Soul Book Volume 2 will be in the can.
Excellent. What was that experience like? Was going from being a performer on the stage, um, touring, different things that you've done, versus being in the studio? Was there a difference, a learning curve, or some things about the studio life that you found unexpected or exhilarating in different ways?
Wow. Well, before I even recorded my first record, Soul Book Volume 1, I had done some other little projects with some producers, but I needed to have something now that the internet was becoming a big thing. People, they need to go somewhere where they can hear your music, and how to get that music in other people's hands. Because up until then, I was traveling word of mouth. No, I went to Turkey. I went to Israel. I started doing all that traveling back when we were working together. I was like, oh, okay, now I have no record. Now I've got to do a record. But I found that when I'm in a studio, I need people. I need an audience. It's a different space. But for my first record that I recorded myself, I did it. I was just frustrated. I wanted a record out. I just wanted to get it done. I hired my guys. I booked the studio time. I didn't have a producer. I just went in and recorded because it was the band I had been working with for a long time. And I went in, and it was just something it was like I had to get it out of me. I didn't say anything to James Brown, my manager, and my dear friend. I didn't tell him anything until when I had everything back. I listened to it and I'm like, oof, I may have needed some help with this. So months later, I had gone to Bangkok for 3 months. I came back. I had listened to it a little bit, and I cringing, like I could hear that I needed it out of my system. And then I let James listen to it, and he was like, okay, so, we talked about it, and, he kind of like, don't do this again. But so I had to spend more money to tighten some things up and get some things right. So that was the first lesson that I learned, but sometimes you have to get something out of your system to learn, because I didn't know, and I didn't want to ask anyone. I just wanted to get the band in there, do it. Now I've did it right. The second one came out of, that first record. Someone heard it, and Corey Weeds, and, he put me on his label Seller Live, which was a big boost to the career. So now more people know about me, but now I have to make sure that my social media is at this level, that, I get those kinds of gigs that keep moving me forward to, to be able to sustain the income, because this music is the only way that I eat. I'm either hosting the music or playing the music or singing the music. So I have to keep elevating my skills.
The getting it out of your system, that's kind of where I am with this podcast. I've had people for a very long time, and this, they're like, write the book, tell your story.
Absolutely. Brooksy,
And
your journey has been amazing. I mean, I'm always amazed by you, and always just so proud of you as being my friend and just being the woman that you are. I've seen you like on the grinds from day one. So yeah, bravo to you.
well, thank you. Now you can get
Yeah.
me all teary.
The
well, it's really scary to start something new. And
Mhm.
so you're, I think, my fourth recording, my
Mhm.
first one on StreamYard. I don't have any money. No one's doing my audio. It's not being produced by anyone but me, which, I am a producer,
Mhm.
but I hire guys to handle the sound, the technology. And so I'm putting all this together. My first couple of ones, they all have gone well, but I'm having to watch back myself. How do I
Mhm.
speak? How am I as an interviewer? I
Mhm.
do well when people interview me. I've had media training for that I had to have back in Sacramento, but it's a whole
Yeah.
different thing. And like you said, you just have to get it out, get those first few out. And that's what
Mhm.
everyone kept telling
Mhm.
me, people around me. They said, Brooksy, don't wait until you've learned how to use editing software. Don't wait
Just
until you have the
do it.
right microphone or headphones. Just start this, put it out there, and don't worry about it. And it will evolve. And so that's kind of where I am. And some of it, I'm like, oh, that was great. And some I was like, maybe I'll do a re-record with that person. So, but I'm gonna. I'm not
Listen,
doing any of
when
that.
you
We're
called
just
me and
getting it
said you're
out
doing a
there.
podcast, I'm like, of course she is. Okay, yeah, why not? I love that about you. I think just like I said, getting it out. Like I would never tell anyone to just. I had about $400 to my name when I knew I was moving to Paris. I had been that summer with my mother for 2 weeks, and I'm like, oh, I'm moving back in October. I couldn't afford the rent that with the place I was living in. The day that I went I was leaving for Paris. The next day I went to the apartment to get my stuff. The landlord was there. He was like, he was packing my stuff and moving me out. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm leaving anyway for Paris tomorrow. $400. I called my mother from the airport and said, hey, just FYI, I'm on my way to Paris. Oh, what? Just I did it because I had been talking about it and I just wanted it out of my system. And I don't want to keep moving through life like that, but you know.
Well, that's how I moved to New York. I sold, my grandmother had two Oriental rugs that she put on the front porch to give to Goodwill. And I was like, can I have those? And I think I made $9,000 selling them.
She had them on the front porch.
Yeah, she was giving them to Goodwill. She was like, they're old. And I was like, I'm counting on that. And I'm like, are you sure I can have them? And she's like, take them, sell them. And I found an antique dealer and they were pretty messed up. And I got, yeah, I think it was right at $9,000
nice
total for both of them. And that is what helped me get to New York. But I moved there with no place to live, no job, and I didn't know anyone. And I finally just had to get on that plane. A friend of mine, my best friend's dad worked for Delta, and he gave me 2 open-ended paid for round trip. So I had a ticket there, and if it didn't work out, I had a ticket home. And whatever happened in between, and literally 2 weeks before I was leaving, I still didn't know where I was going to sleep. And someone told me that they had a friend who had a cousin who had a friend, literally one of those, that was living in Newark. And he flew for American Airlines International, and maybe I could crash with him. And that's what I did for a month. I stayed with Eric in Newark. I had a blow-up mattress. He had a blow-up mattress. There was a TV sitting on a cardboard box, and the only thing to watch on it was a bootleg copy of the Titanic that someone had filmed in a theater, VHS. That's literally it. Now remember, we did not have the internet. There was no lay in bed and stream. Netflix didn't exist. It's hard to imagine.
We didn't even have cell phones.
No cell phones. No cell phones. You had a landline. And I would look out the window and see Manhattan. And it took me about a month to find something. And I met Karen in that first month. I had a list of people, network. And I would go into the city every morning and just hit the streets. And I met with everybody from a director with Sesame Street to a news director at NBC to a costumer. I mean, I had no idea where anything was going to lead. And one of the stage managers I met said, oh, I know this woman, Karen Bacon. She's looking for a PA, this woman, Stacy, that's working with her. And the rest is history.
And that's where we met.
And then and that's when we met. And then I found I rented a room on the Upper East Side that had been rented. I think you remember Nancy, my roommate then.
Mm-hmm.
She had already rented it, but I had forgot to take the ad out. And when I went, she said, you know what? I think you're going to be a better match for me. So she unrented it to them and rented it to me. And I stayed there for 3 years. But you do, I don't know that I want to do that again like that. You have to do these things when you're young. Now, I did kind of move to Mexico the same way. I'm living in Mexico now because during COVID, it was like, what are you going to do? Things are falling apart. Business went down. And going back to the East Coast after my California gig was not looking like the wisest thing to do. And a friend sort of helped talk me into, it took about, 5 minutes. He was like, why don't you move into the casitas on the beach in Mexico? I was like, you know what? If I sell my house, I can pay for them in cash and then I am good. And then start networking San Diego. So that's how I got here. Yeah. It wasn't a plan. None of these things were plans. And that's part of, if you can connect with something that you love doing and follow it and trust the path, then you'll eventually get there. Now, that doesn't mean I have wanted to give up. I have thought this isn't going to work. I'll never make enough money. This isn't happening. I'm kind of in that space right now as I'm rebuilding my business in a different way. I keep kind of coming up against the same roadblocks. And I know that Creator needs me to learn through those before I can move past them. Mm-hmm. So like one step at a time. But there's so much that goes into it. It isn't just what you see. Oh, wow, that was a great party. That was a great event. Look at that festival. What it takes to become and then live that life is a whole nother story.
It is. And I don't think I've ever wanted to give up. I've asked myself, what the am I doing? And like, because also I hadn't, like, what else could I do? I remember one time things after my parents died in 2011, and like my father died in March of that year, and my mother died in October of that year. So I mean, that I was on like a 3 year, just like, what the hell has just happened? My position at the jazz gallery was shifting. I think Dale had retired, and so it was like I needed to get a job, but I was starting to sing more, and I had no money, and like I just so that and I remember just being in bed for days, just like, what I was just defeated. I was, order out some fried rice, and eat it, and then at one point couldn't even pay my rent, and and I remember going to my landlord, and who's now my dear friend, and I was like, I think I'm gonna have to move. Don't know where I was going. But he was like, okay, wait a minute, let's figure this out. And then after that, like, it was just like I just had enough of being that down. And I just tried to lift myself back up. And we lift ourselves up a lot in this business because, like, I didn't know what else to do. I knew, and so I got a job working in an office for, it was in a law. She was an accountant for like super uber wealthy people, and it was an office with ladies cackling in these little cliques, and at lunchtime, we'd all eat together, and it was just they talk about what they watched on TV last night. I was miserable. And after the last month, you get 3 months trial period, she was like, you gotta go. And I'm like, hallelujah. And right at that time, WBGO, I went and had an interview with WBGO to return to a job that I had when I first got out of college, being on the radio. So it worked out, but I was just like, I know I'm not destined to work in an office anymore. And it was just wrong. It was in Midtown. It was in the 40s and on Fifth Avenue. It was just not my vibe at all. But I survived that. And then things started again and again. And I think now I have, I know I'll always have a roof over my head. I know that I'll never starve, hopefully. And just persevere, but you got to be realistic about what it is, and also have faith.
Yeah,
But real faith, like you said, you have to put it in the hands, and you just got
real
to
faith,
be real faith. Yeah.
not
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 hope.
just, not
Yeah.
hope. Hope helps, but
Yeah,
digging
faith.
down deeper with the faith. I do want to touch on your work at WBGO. I
Hmm.
know that there's probably a fair amount of listeners that think I'd like to be a host, radio show host, be the next Howard Stern, be the next whatever. What is that like, and how
Well,
much? What is that kind of?
I love radio. I love radio. I've been at radio most of my life. At some point when I worked for Karen, I started working for Sirius when they were brand new,
Yeah,
before Sirius XM merged. They were just the two kids on the block. Um, but it was at that time that I got my first job overseas, in Turkey. So I was like, oh, wait a minute, I like this. So they held my chair. But anyway, I did. So then after I left Sirius, and then the opportunity came up again for WBGO years later, and I was like, yeah, I can do this again. This is something that I've always done, is radio. Unfortunately, terrestrial radio is almost like a dying art form, and anyone can have a microphone. You can have an audience. You can have your own radio show so radio has changed because we're not even in the studios anymore. Quiet as it's kept. We work from home, so you don't have kids who can come by the radio station anymore and hang out at the station to see an actual jock behind a microphone and see, like, I came up in that in college radio. I went by the radio station at my university of Massachusetts. I was there recently for a concert at the chancellor's house. That was so dope. But I walked into the radio station. The kids were just sitting around. I was a stranger. I walked into the studios. I opened doors. They didn't ask me anything. They didn't say hello. And then I went over to them. I said, hey, I used to work here. And they were sitting around. I'm like, I'm thinking, don't you want to ask me about what I do and how? They were like, oh, yeah. I said, "Are any of you have any interest in radio career?" They're like, yeah, but I was like, it just was so different now. And I'm thinking, wow, I work at this radio station in New York City, and I started right here at WMUA. Oh, sorry to put WMUA on blast, but that's what happened. So, I would recommend anybody who wants to do it, come on and do it, because it's get a part of it. But I think anybody who wants to have an audience, they have those are called followers now, and you have a microphone and you have music, and it's all digital now. I love it. I
Well,
love live radio.
yeah. So the fact that the studio life isn't really there anymore, do you
Yeah.
think that that has changed how? I guess I'm trying to go back and think about some of the stuff I've heard on radio. Now, I actually only listen to Sirius XM because I can't stand
Mm-hmm.
commercials.
Yeah.
So I'm hardcore ever since we did that gig for them
Mm-hmm.
long time ago when they
Mm-hmm.
were, long time ago. But is not having the ability to pop in, do you think that's changed for the kids that want to do it? Because if you walked into my studio, I would have been like, this is the get of the get, right? She worked here, she went on, she did this, but there's like that lack of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering like what would create that kind of new culture?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, the chancellor invited me to come back and speak to the students about it, but there are four students sitting there. They were just chatting, and they didn't ask me anything. And then I just introduced myself, and I'm thinking I'm giving them every opportunity to ask me anything about radio. They didn't seem to have an interest in it beyond just what they were doing, and didn't really ask me any questions. So I don't know how many people, and especially I work for public radio. I've always worked, in public radio. WBGO Sirius is not as commercial free, but no, some of their stations I think have commercials, but
Some of them do.
some of them do, yeah. But we are listener supported public radio, WBGO, and I like that aspect of it. And we have a solid group of listeners. We are now all over the world. Um, I would encourage anybody who wants to do it. But what I get is lots of people who want to be on the air as the performer. They want their records played, or how do they get their music on the air? So there's that. But also now we don't really have control over the programming of the music. Some of us do.
Oh.
So it's the radio game has changed so much. I still love it. I love, I love being in the presence of, good energy and good people, and having music as a way to do that is, my passion, I guess. I didn't choose this business because I was going to make a whole lot of money. Trust me. But it has
Well,
brought me so
yes.
many opportunities. We've traveled to St. Thomas together. We've traveled to Detroit. I got to go to places around the world that I would never go thanks to music. And my, saying like, this is what I want to do. And always I'll have radio. If I think radio is maybe a dying art form, terrestrial radio is, because like you said, most people say I have Sirius. And now AM radio is no longer in people's cars. All the new cars coming out. So radio, we get in the car, we put it in our, Bluetooth, and listen to public radio or Sirius. Yeah. Those
Mhm.
are our two stations.
The streaming.
It's streaming.
We've got about 10, 15 minutes left. And
Mhm.
I do want to touch on the accidental tourist.
Yeah. Evet. Oh, no, that's not. The
That was
accidental tourist. Yeah.
the accidental tourist. Now, remind me, I saw that a long time ago. And yes, if
Yes.
you find it, I'd love to watch that again.
Oh
But
my
how did
goodness.
that come about?
That is a great story. I was hanging out one night. I came home around 4 in the morning. I was a little lit. And this was a time when Google had this program. Like if you got on, but you could program between the hours of say 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. If I get on here, I can't, you have to ask me 5 questions. So they would ask you like, oh, you missed 3. So I got on. I saw an email from a production company from Israel asking me would I be interested in coming to Israel. They're looking for a few people. My friends recommended me. One of my friends, Lee, was living in Israel. She's married to an Israeli. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this could be a hoax. So I said, well, you know what? Let me answer you tomorrow. I'll write you tomorrow morning, because they were already ahead of us in time. Anyway, I talked to them, and they said they had invited like 8 people from around the world, from different places, like friends of friends, to come at different times to experience Israel and in their own eyes. So I was like, 2 weeks later, I was on a plane on El Al, going to Tel Aviv. There was a camera crew waiting when I got there, and myself and my friend Lee is Black. She's oh, I can't remember what her nationality is, but so it was the two of us. They rented a car. You know, it was our little experience in Tel Aviv. There was a camera crew following us to. We were on our way to Eilat, but there were plenty stops along the way in the desert. I had never planned on ever going to Israel. I don't think it wasn't in my like, oh, one day I want to go to Jerusalem. I'd never thought of it. And here I am on it's part of this big, in Channel 8 is like the Channel 13, our public television station here. And it was just about my experience with Jewish people, with Israel, with like what were my thoughts about it. I met a whole community of African Americans who had fought for a part of the Israeli land. They set up all these kind of different situations, and here I am, you know, experiencing them all, going through the desert when the military blocks it off at certain times of the day and you have to wait if you don't make the time. And I'm out here on the road in the desert in Israel singing Besame Mucho with people who are lined up waiting to. We were outside for about an hour in the heat, maybe an hour and a half, and I had people dancing. It was bananas. But
Well, I hope you find it because I'd like to see that again.
I do
How
too, you
long
know.
ago was that?
Oh boy, that might have been like 2000, and because I wasn't working for Karen then. What was I doing? Oh, I don't remember. What did I do? Yeah, it was a
2010, never again.
no. You
You
never.
were the
Oh yeah. Oh yes, I do. It might have been. It was early 2000s, like 2003, 2004.
oh, you were working
I was
there.
working for Karen then. Yeah, but at some point she may
Remember
be giving me some time off.
2008, it won't be
Won't be late.
great.
Yeah,
2009, it'll still be fine. We ran that song up to
up until
double
we
digits.
might have done it in when we had during the lockdown. We got together. We might have made up something.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, I'd love to see that if you
Yeah,
find it.
I went looking for it recently, and it was up. But if I find it, I'll show it to you because it was kind of wild to be filmed. Like you see reality television now. It's like, wow, I did one of those, but had great experiences.
And I can assume that, like you said, they probably didn't give you a lot of prep. I got recruited for a reality show back in 2015 or 14, and it was on events, and I got pretty far. I got into like I got as far as where they send you the contract and you look over like what you're going to have to do. And that was like, I am signing my life away for this. There is like no final cut, no participation in what it looks like. And my friend was like, oh, you're exaggerating. And then he read the contract. He goes, you really are signing your life away. You're giving them liberties to show and edit and put forward you in this reality show and events in whatever capacity they want. This could destroy your business. And I was like, I think so. So I bowed out. I didn't go any further.
Yeah,
But those
yeah.
things,
Well,
those
they're
things
out there.
are scary.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
you've been
scared
there?
because, well, just just that whole taping. I mean, it was not scripted. It was, I didn't know there would be a film crew. Maybe they told me when as soon as I got off the plane, clear customs. It was like, but in a way, I was like, yes, I'm being filmed. I'm here, and I'm a star. It was kind of like it was cool too, but also. But what was the great part about it is when I got back, I have a lot of Israeli friends, so jazz musicians, and they would see me. I'm like, Lezlie, we saw you on Channel 8, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. So yeah, that was fun. That was fun, and it just helped. It helped me along the way.
Well, you have certainly come far over all these years,
Bye,
and
Faith.
I could not be more proud and
Thank you, Brooksy.
honored that we have been friends for so long.
Yes,
I still
indeed.
refer to you. You were my first friend in New York City,
Yes,
and you are. How tall are you for our listeners?
Oh, 6 feet for your listeners.
6 feet.
5'11" for everybody else. I know.
I'm 5'1".
Yeah, we made quite a pair.
We made quite a pair going out, and many a nights at Arturo's, and many a nights with the
West
bar
West.
stools on the bar, and they're like, "Ladies, it's
We're
time to
closed.
go." We closed, like
Woo!
we've mopped the floors. You're still here.
But we
So
always made it to work the next day, right?
always. That's another thing. Never, ever missed a day of work because
That's
of
right.
being out late or going to one of your jams or anything. You
Absolutely.
get your
Absolutely.
butt there. And I've had some challenges with some employees back in Sacramento. They would they're like, "Oh, I was late." I'm like, "You are talking to the wrong person because you have no idea what I have done to make sure I was always at work." It's very important. You got
Oh
to take your
yeah.
job seriously.
Well, that was the only
But
way I could afford to hang out.
yeah, no,
Really, was to
well,
work. Yeah.
exactly. And it's all part of the lifestyle too in some
Right.
ways, especially as a jazz singer and a
Right.
performer. You need to be in the environment. You need to be out at the
Yeah.
Village Vanguard
Mm-hmm.
and Blue Note and Arturo's and all these places at 2, 3 in the morning because that's where you're going to bump into your
Yep.
opportunity.
And to find
And
your
like
band
you had
members.
shared, and find your
Sometimes,
band
yeah.
members.
Right.
It is about being available for opportunity to find you sometimes, not
Absolutely.
just about the hustle
Right.
and finding that balance. As you get older, it's a little bit more challenging because I like to go to bed at 9 o'clock now. So
Word. Listen, if I'm not
not bumping
working,
into
I go to
people.
bed. I go to bed, well, early. I watch to stay in because New York City is super expensive now, so it's really hard to just go out and hang out. But yeah,
Yeah.
rest is important.
Okay. Couple of quick questions here.
Mhm.
Just first thing that comes to mind, and this is just our way of wrapping it up. So you've not been prepped for this. And what do you, so and new to kind of throwing these out too, finding a new way to wrap up my podcast. So sunrise or sunset?
Sunsets. Sunsets on the beach. I love to see the sun go down. There's a song by Frankie Beverly, who just passed away. There's a time of the day when the sun's going down. That's the golden time of day. The golden time of day. Yeah, sunsets.
Sunsets. Okay. Dog or cat?
Cat.
Cats.
Well, you got to walk a dog. And Brooksy,
I do.
speaking about sunrises, they like to get up at sunrise. I do too, but not to take the dog out in January. So, cats.
I don't miss walking Cabo when it was 4 outside and
That's what I'm
snowing,
talking about.
I will say. Okay. In terms of food, what is your favorite food if you had to pick one? You get to eat one thing. That's it.
Mushrooms. I'm a vegan, so
No.
mushrooms take the place of a lot of. Oh no, I want to switch that. I'm going to switch that up. My favorite food are greens, collard, kale, all of them. I love greens.
Good for you.
Yes. I'm a vegan, right?
I do, but I mean, that doesn't
But
mean
yeah, greens. I love greens. I can have collard greens every day, kale every day, every day,
Mm.
every day, every day.
Okay, hot or cold?
Hot. I'm a warm weather girl. I'm half Caribbean, and half Southern. So both of those sides reside in the places that are warmer than they are here in New York.
Okay, then last question. Within your career, from being a jazz singer to the on-air radio to Accidental Tourist, even though that was that stage performance, if you only could choose one track or leg of the industry, what would sort of be your first thought that you would pick?
Oh, singing. Yeah, I
And
love the.
yet,
Mhm.
that is the one thing you did not know you wanted to do when you started.
Exactly. Exactly. I knew
I
I
didn't know
wanted to
that
say,
question was going to go so well as a wrap
yeah,
up, but it
that's
does.
it. That's it.
Yep. You started out thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And you accidentally became a singer. And that
Mhm.
is what
I
led
sure
you,
did.
you let that unfold for your passion.
I sure did. And thank you for letting me express that and share that with you and your listeners, especially with you, because most of it, but the
I do.
backstories, yeah.
I do. And I'm looking forward to starting to interview people that I don't know as well. And I think you shared this before we started the record that that's one of the challenges when you don't know people so well. You got to do all the research and look into it and try to
Mhm.
find some common ground and conversation. And so right now, I'm so lucky.
Yeah.
I have you and John Kivlin and a handful of others that I've known a long time. So the conversation, I know your stories. So I am looking forward to some people I don't know so well, because I'm also curious about stuff,
Curious. Yeah. Yeah.
this isn't just about the things I know, excuse me, but I'm looking forward to. I got a tour bus driver who is drives for headline bands,
Right.
and I'm waiting to find out. My
That's
booking
great.
agent is looking for the right one that has the right personality to say, like, what is that life like? What is it
Mm-hmm.
like to drive that bus?
Mm-hmm.
Is it all crazy, or are you bored? So
Yeah. What's
there's
the
a
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff out there to have a conversation with people that I just think is going to be interesting to know, not like what you read in the book or in the magazine, but get a sense of, what their life was like, and was this their intention
Right.
to do this from the beginning. So with
Well,
that
thank
said,
you.
Lezlie, thank you so much. And for the listeners, please stay tuned for other recordings of Are You Sure You Want to Do This? I will be putting this on YouTube when I launch, which will be very, very soon. But until then, thank you so much. And again, thank you, Miss Lezlie.
Love you, Brooksy. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't know how to stop it.
You're gonna have to learn how to edit, girl.
Oops. Bye.
Bye.